Hello, everybody. This is B back again, and we are going to be reading Chapter 7 of Five Nights at Freddy's The Twisted One, so that should be fun. Anyways, when they got back to the college, Charlie headed for the dorm. Hey, slow down, John struggled to catch up. You have the disc? Of course, he patted his pocket. I know, I've seen something like this before, she said. I'll show you. She glanced at John as she let him into the room she shared with Jessica, but his face remained impassive. He had already seen the mess, but John didn't look in the direction of Charlie's desk and covered faces. You can clear off the chair, Charlie said as she shoved a stack of books out of the way. She crawled under a bed and emerged a moment later with a large cardboard box. John was standing beside the chair, looking perplexed. I said you can clear it off, she said. He laughed. Clear it off to where? Right. The chair had a stack of books on the seat and a stack of t-shirts draped over the back. Charlie grabbed the shirts and threw them onto the bed. She set the box on the bed and settled herself cross-legged behind it so that John would be able to look through it too. So, what is all this? He leaned slowly over the box as Charlie rummaged through it, pulling parts out one by one and setting them in a straight line on the bed. Stuff from my dad's house, electronics, mechanical parts, things from animatronics from his work. She glanced at him nervously. I know I said that I just went back for Theodore, and I did, but I may have grabbed a few things on the way out. I wanted to learn these classes, John. You know some of the some of the teach my father was working with was ancient. It's practically ridiculous. Oh, teach. Some of the tech my father was working with was ancient. It's practically ridiculous now. But he was making it up as he went along. He thought of stuff that's still unique, that no one else has thought of yet. I wanted all of it. I wanted to understand it. So I went back to get what I could. You stripped the house for parts, I get it. John laughed as he picked up Theodore's severed paw and considered it for a moment. Even your favorite toy? Don't you think that's a little heartless? Is it? Charlie picked up a piece from the box, a metal joint, and weighed it in her hand. I took Theodore apart because I wanted to understand him, John. Isn't that the most loving thing there is? Maybe I should reconsider this whole dating thing, John said, wide-eyed. He was important to me because my father made him for me, not because he was stitched up to look like a rabbit. She discarded the joints, setting it next to her on the bed. She turned her attention to the box and picking up pieces one by one, she said, setting them in a row. She was sure she recognized what she needed when she saw it. Charlie looked at the circuitry and wires, metal joints, and plastic casing, examining each piece carefully. Something would cry out to her, just like the animatronic beast had done, with that raw sense of wrongness. But after a while, her neck grew sore from bending over the box. Her eyes were beginning to glaze over. She discarded the piece of metal tubing in her hand, tossing it into the growing pile on her bed. At the clanking sound, John looked up. Where do you even sleep? He asked, gesturing not only to the growing pile of electronic and mechanical parts, but to the clothing and books, those smaller piles of electronic and mechanical parts. Charlie shrugged. There's always room for me, she said mildly, even if it's just barely. Yeah, but what about when you're married? John's face flushed before he even finished the sentence. Charlie looked up at him, one eyebrow hinged slightly higher than the other. Someday, John said hastily, to someone else. His face grew grimmer. Charlie felt her eyebrow lift higher of its own volition. So what are we looking for again? John burrowed his brow and scooted his chair closer to the bed, peering into the box. This. Spotting a glimmer in the pile, Charlie took hold of a small disc and carefully placed it in the palm of her hand. She held it out so John could see. It looked just like the metallic disc they found in the body of the animatronic, but one side of it had been damaged, revealing curious metal framework inside. Several wires extended, connecting to a black keyboard not much larger than the disc itself. Funny, Charlie chuckled to herself. What? The last time I held this, I was more interested in the keypad, she smiled. This part is a common diagnostic tool. Someone must have been testing it. Or trying to find out what it was, John added. That thing doesn't look like anything else in the box. Just like that monster we found doesn't look like anything your dad made. I mean, it kind of looked like Foxy, but not the one your dad made. This one was sort of twisted version of Foxy. She pulled a heavy metal joint from the box. This doesn't belong here either. What's wrong with it? It's meant to be an elbow, but look. She bent the joint all the way over, then all the way back the other way, then looked at John expectantly. He looked blank. So, my father wanted to use this. He always put stops so that the joints couldn't do things humans can't do. Maybe it's not finished. It's finished. It's not just that, though. It's the way the metal is cut, the way it's put together. It's like you write things, right? So you read other people's work. He nodded. If I ripped up some books and gave you a big pile of pages and asked you to pick out the ones by your favorite author, could you do that, just based on style? Yeah, of course. I mean, I might be wrong about a few, but yeah. What's the same thing here? She held a heavy piece up again to make her point. My dad didn't write this. Okay, but what does it mean? John asked. He unplugged the broken disc from the diagnostic keyboard and took the second disc from the monster out of his pocket. He fiddled with it briefly, then managed to unhinge one side of it. Frowning with concentration, he attached the wires from the keypad to the new disc. When he finished, he hesitated. I don't want to flip any of the switches, he said. I don't think my stomach can take it. Yeah, don't touch anything yet. After what happened at the house, we shouldn't assume that we know what any of this does. Charlie set the box on the floor and started shuffling through the parts again, looking at the patterns, trying to see something in them. There has to be something else in here that I'm missing. Charlie, John said, sorry to interrupt your conversation with yourself. Sorry, we're back. There has to be something else in here that I'm missing. Charlie, John said, sorry to interrupt your conversation with yourself, but look. He passed her the broken disc he had unhooked. Look on the back. The back once been smooth, but it was scratched a lot since it was first made. Charlie stared at it for a minute, then finally saw it. There was writing along the edge. She had to bring the piece of plastic close to her face to make the letters out. They were tiny and written in old-fashioned, flowing script. They read, Afton Robotics, LLC. Charlie dropped the disc immediately. Afton? William Afton? That's my father's old partner. That's Dave's real name, John finished. Charlie sat silently for a moment, feeling as if something very large and unwielding had been shoved into her head. I thought he was just a business partner for Freddy, she said slowly. I guess he did a bit more than that. He's dead, though. It's not like we can ask him questions. We have to figure out what's happening now. She grabbed the cardboard box and swept the extension pieces, the pieces that had been her father's, into it, then shoved it back under the bed. John ducked out of her way as she maneuvered around the small space. And how do you think we should do that? He asked. What is happening now? There has been 2 bodies so far, both killed by something like what we just found. 3 bodies, Charlie said, flushing silently. John covered his face with his hands for a moment and took a deep breath. Okay, 3. Are you sure it's not 4? I didn't see the 3rd one. Clay just told me about it after she was found. It had been out for a few days. She was the first one, I think. So why them? Are these robots just going on a killing spree? Why would they do that? Charlie, is there anything else about this that you're not telling me? Charlie bit her lip, hesitant. I'm serious. I'm in this with you, but if I don't know what's happening, I can't help you. Charlie nodded. I don't know if it means anything. Clay said it was just a coincidence. But the woman I found in the field, John, she looked like me. His expression went dark. What do you mean, looked like you? Not exactly like me. Brown hair, same size, sort of. I don't know. If you described me to someone and asked them to pick me out in the crowd, they might come back with her. There was just this awful moment when I looked down at her, and it was like looking at me. Clay said it didn't mean anything. He said it's a college town. There are a lot of brown-haired girls around. One of the two other victims was a man, so probably a coincidence then, John offered. Yeah, Charlie said. I guess it was just unsettling. There must be something else that's linking them together. Another person, a job, a location, maybe? John looked towards the window. Charlie caught him smiling, and John's expression sobered, looking suddenly self-conscious. You're enjoying this, she said. No, he shrugged. I wouldn't put it that way. I don't want any more bodies, but it's a mystery, and it's an excuse to spend some time with you. He smiled, but quickly made his face serious again. So what about the bodies? Where were they found? Well, Charlie brushed the hair off of her face, slightly distracted. They were all around. They were all found in fields, miles apart. The first one, the one they found, was over on the far side of the hurricane. On the far side of Hurricane, and the girl I found today was left by the side of the road between Hurricane and here. Where on the road? How far from here? About halfway. Suddenly her eyes widened. Forget the fields, or don't forget them, but they're not the point, or at least not the whole point. The holes was behind the woman's house. They take them from their homes. That's where they're starting. It's where we should start, too. She headed for the door, and John frowned. Or followed. Wait, what? Where are we going? My car. I want to look. My car. I want to look at the map. When they got to the car, Charlie pulled a stack of papers out of the glove compartment and rifled through them, then pulled out a map and handed it to John. Give me a pen. She held out her hand, and John pulled two from his front pocket, handing her one. Charlie spread the map out on the hood of the car, and they bent over it. The woman's house was here, she said, circling the spot. Clay gave me the addresses of the others. She pulled the now slightly grubby menu from her pocket and handed it to John. You look for that one, she said quietly. Even though they both knew the area, tracing the streets for victims' houses took longer than Charlie had expected it. Found it, John announced. 1158 Oak Street is right there. She circled the point and stepped back. What's that? John said, pointing to another scribbled in the margin. Charlie picked up the corner of the map, and her heart skipped. It was another drawing of a rectangle. She didn't remember making it. It's a door, but what door? She stared down at it. It had no knobs or latches, nothing to indicate how she would get inside, or where it was. What good is it to know what I'm looking for if I don't know why or how to find it? Just a doodle, she said sternly to redirect his attention. Come on, concentrate. Yeah, John said. At the least, the pattern was instantly clear. The houses made a crooked line from Hurricane towards St. George, truncated halfway between. They're all about the same distance apart, Charlie said, a swell of dread rising in her chest. John was nodding as if he understood. What does it mean? She asked urgently. They're moving in specific direction, traveling roughly the same distance between. He paused. Killing. Who's killing who? A voice rang out behind them. Charlie gasped and whirled around, her heart pounding. Jessica was behind her, holding a stack of books to her chest. Her eyes were wide, and a grin of excitement broke across her face. We were just talking about the movie we saw last night, John said, with a casual smile. Oh yeah, okay. Jessica gave him a quick look of Fox's seriousness and glanced at Charlie. So, Charlie, what's the map for? She asked, gesturing to it elaborately. Oh, does it have to do with Freddy's? She said with excitement in her voice, and John looked at Charlie suspiciously. Did she tell you? Jessica looked at John, and John looked back at Charlie, eager to hear the rest. Jessica, now probably isn't the best time, Charlie said feebly. We went to Freddy's yesterday, Jessica said in a hushed tone, although no one else was around. Oh, really? Funny Charlie didn't mention that. Was that before or after all that shopping? John folded his arms. I was going to tell you, Charlie murmured. Charlie, sometimes I think you're just trying to get yourself killed. John put his hand over his face. So what's the map for? Jessica repeated. What are we looking for? Monsters, Charlie said. New animatronics. They're murdering people, seemingly at random. She continued, not fully convinced of what she just said. Jessica's face grew grave, but her eyes were held a twinkle of eagerness as she walked around the side of the car to dump her books on the back seat. How? Where did they come from? Freddy's? No, not Freddy's. They came from my dad's house, we think. But they weren't his, Jessica. He didn't build them. We think it was Dave Afton, whatever his name is. The word had come tumbling all at once, nonsensical, and John stepped in to translate. She means that. No, I get it, Jessica cut in. You don't have to talk to me like I'm uninitiated. I was at Freddy's last year, too, remember? I've seen some crazy things, so what are we going to do? She looked at Charlie, her game face on. She looked far more together than Charlie felt. We don't know what any of it means for sure, John said. We're still figuring it out. Why didn't you tell me? Jessica asked. Charlie looked up at her hesitantly. I just didn't want it to be like last time, she said. There's no need to put everyone at risk. Yeah, just me, John smirked. I get that, Jessica said, but after what happened last time, I mean, we're in this together. John leaned back against the car, glancing around for anyone who might be listening. So, Jessica stepped around her to look at the map. What are we doing? Charlie leaned in and squinted at the distance key on the map. There's about 3 miles between each location. She studied the map again for a moment, then drew another circle. That's my house, my dad's house. She looked up at John. Whatever is out there killing people came from there. They must have. Her voice trailed off. When the storm broke the wall, John muttered. What? A section of the house was sealed until the storm broke through. With firm strokes, Charlie drew a straight line from her father's house through the 3 houses of the victims and continued the line across the map. That can't be right, Jessica said when she saw where the line finally ended. John peered over Charlie's shoulder. Isn't that your college? He asked. Yeah, it's our dorm. The excitement had left Jessica's voice. That doesn't make any sense. Charlie couldn't take her eyes off the paper. It felt a little like she had drawn the path to her own death. It wasn't a coincidence, she said. What are you talking about? Don't you get it? She let out a faint laugh, unable to stop herself. It's me. They're coming for me. They're looking for me. What? Who are they? Jessica looked to John. There were 3 empty graves at her dad's house, so there must be 3 of them out there somewhere. They move at night, Charlie said. I mean, they can't walk around in the daylight, so they find a place to bury themselves until nightfall. Even if you're right, and they're coming for you, John said, bending down and trying to catch her eye. Now we know they're coming, and going by this, we can at least guess where they might go next. So what are you saying? What does that matter? Charlie heard her own voice break. It matters because those things are out there right now, buried in someone's yard, and when the sun goes down, they're going to kill again. In the most horrible way possible. Charlie said nothing. Her head bowed. Look, John straightened out the map and pushed it into Charlie's lap, so she couldn't help but see it. Somewhere in here, he pointed to the next circled area on the line. We can stop them if we can find them first, John said with urgency. Okay, Charlie took a breath. We don't have much time, though. John grabbed the map and they all got into the car. Just tell me where to go, Charlie said grimly. John peered down at the map. So this is where we need to be, he confirmed, pointing to the 5th circle, and Charlie nodded. He turned the map and squinted. Turn left out of the parking lot, then take a next right. I know this place. I've driven past it. It's an apartment complex. It's pretty run down from what I remember. Jessica leaned forward, poking her head between the front seats. Those circles don't look too precise. It could be anywhere in the area. Yeah, but I'm guessing it's going to be the place with the 3 fresh graves in the backyard, John said. Charlie glanced at each of them for a second before fixating her eyes back on the road. There was safety in numbers. Last year, when they were all trapped at Freddy's together, Jessica was the one who had gotten them inside the restaurant in the first place. She was brave, even when she didn't want to be, and that meant more than whatever notion of romance John was entertaining. Charlie, turn right, John exclaimed. She yanked the wheel, barely making the turn. Focus. Imminent murder first, everything else later. Before them lay sprawling fields, lots marked out and prepared for construction and future development, but never finished. Some had never even begun. Slabs of concrete were stacked here and there, almost completely obscured by overgrowth. A few lots away, steel beams had been erected to make a foundation that was never filled in. The place had decayed before it was completed. In the farthest lot back was a cluster of what seemed to be finished apartment complexes. Grass and weeds grew rampant around them, however, climbing up their walls. It looked like years of growth. It was hard to tell whether anyone lived inside. Years ago, the city had been diligent preparing for population boom, one that never came. Are there even people out here? Jessica was gazing out the window. There must be. There are parked cars. John craned his neck. I think those are cars. I don't know where we're supposed to look, though. I think we have to drive around. Charlie slowed the car as they traversed the road heading towards the buildings. Maybe not, John said. I bet it's somewhere near the edge of the development. Most people would probably call the police if they saw 8-foot monsters digging holes in someone's backyard. There is a lot of visibility here. Of course, Charlie said, with dread in her voice. They're buried out of sight and strategically placing themselves so as not to be found. She looked at John expectantly, but he just stared back. They're intelligent, she explained. I think I would have liked it better if they were roaming the streets mindlessly. At least then someone could call the National Guard or something. Charlie kept her eyes on the fields. They drove around the outer edges of the development, slowly looking at the yards of each house. Some of the buildings looked abandoned, the windows boarded up or torn out completely, opening the apartments to the elements. The storm had done damage, but little had been done to repair it. A tree had fallen across one of the cul-de-sacs, blocking the building off completely. But it didn't look like anyone was trying to get in or out. The tree rotted where it lay. There was litter strewn in the abandoned streets, collecting in the gutters and bolstering the curbs. Maybe one apartment 5 had curtains in the windows. Occasionally they passed a parked car or a toppled tricycle on the patchy grass. No one came outside, though, Charlie thought. She saw a curtain pull shut as they drove past. In 2 backyards there were above-ground pools filled by rainwater, and one had a large trampoline. Its springs rusted and its canvas torn. Just a second, Charlie pulled to a stop, leaving the car running as she approached a tall wooden fence. It was too high to climb, but there was a single board that hung loose off its nail near the base. She squatted down and pried away to peek inside. 2 round black eyes glared at her. Charlie froze. The eyes belonged to a dog, a massive thing, which started to bark, its teeth gnashing and its chain clanking. Charlie slammed the board back in place and walked to the car. Okay, let's keep going. Nothing, Jessica said dubiously, and Charlie shook her head. Maybe they didn't make it this far. I think they did, Charlie said. I think they're doing exactly what they mean to. Charlie pulled the car over to the shoulder of the winding road and looked at the apartment building on either side. This could have been a nice place to live, she said softly. Why are we stopping? John looked confused. Charlie leaned back in the seat and she closed her eyes. Locked in a box, a dark, cramped box. Can't move, can't see, can't think. Let me out. Her eyes flew open and she grabbed the handle of the car door in a panic. She pulled against it hard. It's locked, John said. He leaned across her to pull up the button lock. I know that, she said angrily. She got out and closed the door. John moved to follow her, but Jessica placed her hand on his shoulder. Leave her alone for a minute, she said. Charlie leaned over the trunk, propping her chin on her hands. What am I missing, Dad? She stood up straight and stretched her arms over her head, turning her whole body slowly to study her surroundings. There was an empty lot beyond the development, not far from where they were. It was marked out with the telephone poles, only one of which had wires. A breeze dragging the loose wires through the dirt, scattering gravel. It didn't look like it had been paved. There was a coil of barbed wire as tall as Charlie, sitting uselessly in the corner. Empty cans and fast food wrappers littered the ground, and the paper quivering and the cans rattling in the slight wind like they sensed something awful. The wind rushed up behind Charlie and blew past her, straight towards the field, rustling the papers and cans and sending waves across the patches of brown grass. Something wrong is planted there. Filled with a new energy, Charlie opened the car door just enough to lean inside. That lot. We had to go look. What do you see? It's kind of out of the way, John said. Charlie nodded. You said it yourself. If an 8-foot monster is digging up the neighbor's backyard, someone's going to notice. Besides, I have a feeling. Jessica got out of the car and John followed at her heels. Charlie already had the trunk open. She pulled out a shovel and the big Maglite flashlight she always kept close by, and a crowbar. I've only got one shovel, she explained, making it clear she was keeping it for herself. Jessica took the flashlight and made a practice swing with it, as if hitting an invisible assailant. Why would you even have a shovel? Jessica asked in a suspicious tone. Aunt Jen, John said by way of explanation. Jessica laughed. Well, you never know when you might have to dig up a robot. Come on, Charlie said, tossing John the crowbar and starting off. He caught it with ease and jogged beside her, cleaning, and so Jessica wouldn't hear. How come I don't get the shovel? I figured you can swing a crowbar harder than I can, Charlie said. He grinned. Makes sense, he said confidently, gripping the crowbar with new purpose. When they reached the edge of the lot, John and Jessica stopped, looking down at the ground before them, as though scared of what they might step on. Charlie went ahead across the loose dirt, gripping the shovel tightly. The field was mostly barren soil, studded with large mounds of gravel and dirt that had been left for so long that the grass had begun growing on them. This must have been the dumping grounds for when they were building, John said. He took a step back into the lot, avoiding a broken glass bottle. At the opposite edge was the tree line. Charlie studied it carefully, tracking its path back in the direction they'd come. John knelt beside a pile of gravel and carefully poked at it with his crowbar as though something might leap out. Jessica had wandered towards a cluster of bushes. She crouched in to pick something up, then quickly dropped it and wiped her hands on her shirt. Charlie, this place is disgusting, she cried. Charlie had reached the tree line and began walking alongside it, studying the ground. See anything? John yelled from the other side of the lot. Charlie ignored him. Deep grooves in the dirt extended from the trees, snaking around the bushes. The large rocks nearby were freshly marked with gashes and scrapes. Not exactly footprints, Charlie whispered as she followed the grooves in the soil. Her foot touched soft ground, in sudden contrast to the hard-packed dirt of the rest of the lot. She stepped back. The dirt at her feet was discolored, familiar. Charlie stuck her shovel into the ground and started to dig, the metal rasping noisily on the gravel mixed in with the dirt. Jessica and John ran towards her. Careful, John warned as he approached. He hefted the crowbar in his hands like a baseball bat, ready to strike. Jessica hung back. Charlie saw that her knuckles were white on the flashlight's handle, but her face was calm and determined. The dirt was loose and came away easily. At last the blade of the shovel struck metal with a hollow clunk. They all jumped. Charlie handed the shovel to John and knelt in the mess of scattered earth, brushing away the dirt with her hands. Careful, Jessica said, her voice higher pitched than usual, and John echoed her. This was a horrible idea, he murmured, scouting the area. Where's the police car when you need one? Or any car? It's still day for a little while longer, Charlie said absently, focused on the ground as her hands ran through it, prying away rocks and clods of dirt, digging to find what lay beneath. Yeah, it's day. It's also day when that twisted foxy attacked you earlier. Remember? John said more urgently. Wait, what? Jessica exclaimed. Charlie, get away from there. You didn't tell me that. She turned on John accusingly. Look, a lot has been going on, okay? John raised his hands, palms out. Yeah, but if you're gonna sign me up for this stuff, then you need to tell me about things like that. You were attacked. Signed you up for this? You had one foot in the car at the first mention of murder. You practically invited myself. You talk like I crashed your date, but you didn't exactly fall over yourself to refuse my help. Jessica planted her hands on her hips. Charlie, John sighed, can you please talk to... Oh, geez. He jumped backwards. Jessica followed suit as soon as she looked down. Beneath him, gazing up from the loose dirt, was an enormous metal face staring towards the sun. Charlie didn't say anything. She was still busy scooping away the soil from the edges, revealing 2 round ears on the side of its head. "Charlie, is that Freddy?" Jessica gasped. "I don't know. I think it was supposed to be." Charlie heard the anxiety in her own voice as she stared down at the large, lifeless bear with its perpetual smile. The crude metal frame was covered with a layer of gelatinous plastic, giving it the organic appearance, almost embryonic. "It's huge," John gasped, "and there's no fur, just like the other Foxy." Charlie's hands were getting sore. She cleared the hair from her face and stood up. It was Freddy, but somehow not. The bear's eyes were open, glazed over with the inanimate look of lifelessness Charlie knew so well. This bear was dormant, for now. "Charlie, we have to go," John said with a tone of warning. But he didn't move, still staring down. He knelt beside the face and began to claw at the dirt above its forehead, clearing the earth away until he saw it. A filthy, battered black top hat. Charlie felt a small tugging at her mouth, and she bit her lip. "We should call Burke," Jessica said. "Now." They all turned back towards the development as the wind rose again, rushing past them and making waves in the tall grass. The earth was still, and the sun was sinking lower behind the rolling hills in the distance. And that's the end of chapter 7. So I hope you guys enjoyed. So now we have Foxy and we found Freddy. So here we go. Hope you guys enjoyed. Bye-bye.